how to excel at your internship once you already have an internship. I'm going to give the phase one now, which is we're going to talk about what is an internship in the first place, why you should do one, and how to get one, and like everything about internships basically. So there'll be a bias towards like overseas internships, but it doesn't really matter because almost everything I'm saying right now like applies to almost all local companies and overseas companies. It doesn't really matter. So who am I? My name is Vishnu, and I'm a final year student in computer science in NUS. I've interned at these three companies, Twitter, Apple, and latest I was at Uber with Chen. Spent my last summer there. And all these internships were in the San Francisco area. Okay, so let's go on to what is an internship in the first place. So an internship is basically, it's usually 12 to 14 weeks long, and you're basically working with the team. And they basically treat you like a full-time employee, but you're just there temporarily. So you could treat that as like temporary work, where you are given all the normal responsibilities of a full-time engineer at most companies, and you're just there for 3 months. So like it's on trial. So you're trying out the company, and the company is trying you out, just because you're a really capable university student, and they might want to hire you in the future as a really valuable employee. You work with a team. You are never working alone. You're always attached to a team. And the team usually does real work. Like it's usually a team that's working on something that's really exciting inside that company. That was my team at Uber. My team was called Driver. We went through many reorgs. I think it was, by the time I left, it was called Driver Engagement. When I joined, it was Driver Experience, then it became something else. That was Driver Engagement in 3 months. You also have a mentor and a manager. Your manager is just like your boss, and your mentor is just basically a guy that guides you through everything that you're doing. Most companies have that as well, a mentor who's just a fellow engineer in the team, and a manager who's usually the manager of that team itself. And you also usually get to do an intern project because the companies are really trying to get you to join. So the companies want you to do something that's really valuable for the company as well, so that you can go back to school and show off with your friends by telling them, hey, I built this and I built that. So you usually get this really well scoped out project where you start the project, you scope out the project in the first 2 weeks, you build it, you test it, you ship it, and then by the end of your 12 weeks, they're usually done, and you get to ship out something that you can call your own. Yeah, you also get to do real work. You're doing actual real work here. You're not just bringing coffee for someone. That's not how most tech internships work. You're actually doing real work. You're working just like a normal full-time engineer and doing the real stuff. And at NUS, you can also get free credits for doing this. There's this thing called SIP. If you do a 3-month internship in the summer, you get 6 MCs. And if you do a 6-month internship, you can get 12 MCs. And you can apply that for overseas internships as well. So you can just get like free credits and graduate earlier if that's what you want. It's awesome. So, okay, so now you know what's an internship, but why should you do an internship? But why? Okay, so why should we do it? I have a few reasons. The first reason is that you get to do something impactful while in school. That's the word there, while in school. And basically you get to, since if you're working at this like Silicon Valley types of companies, or even companies in Singapore like Viki, GrabTaxi, and Garena, these companies, they own products that are used by millions of people almost at the same time. And you get to impact these products, you get to make like actual technical decisions on the things that they do, and you get to work on these actual products. I'll go through a few examples on what I got to do in my 3 internships. Okay, I'm going to skip Twitter because I have no time, I'll just go straight to Apple. So when I was at Apple, I got to work on Xcode. If you don't know what Xcode is, so Xcode is the app that you use to make apps. A bit confusing, yeah. So all the iPhone apps that you see in the App Store are made using this thing called Xcode. And yeah, so I was with the team for 6 months. I did a long 8-app internship. I skipped school for a while. And but at my time, while I was at Xcode, I got to work on a bunch of things. Last year when I gave this talk, I couldn't tell anyone what I did because it's Apple and you can't tell anyone what you do because of how secretive the company is, but now I can because of the fact that my feature is released. And this is what I got to work on. So I worked on this in 2015, and in 2016 in Xcode 8, they released it. So I worked on the first prototype of Xcode editor extensions. So in Xcode 8 now, there's a feature where they're finally bringing plugin like functionality to the IDE. Previously, you couldn't do that legally, and I built. So my project for the first 6 months there was to build a prototype to show that this thing can even work. and it's like shipped as a real feature now that probably millions of users can use. I think like Xcode 8 is still in beta, but once it goes out of beta, like anyone can build an editor extension and ship it. Pretty cool stuff. I also spent my last summer at Uber, worked on 2 big features there. I was on the driver experience team, so we were in charge of basically all the drivers on the platform. There are millions of drivers that drive on Uber every single month, and we were in charge of like building features for them, the app, how the app works, how Uber Pool works, all those kinds of things. So the feature that I worked on was this feature called Stop New Request. It's a simple feature if you think about it. So the problem is, imagine Uber Pool, and if you're in Uber Pool right now, you could pick up passenger A, then pick up B, and then drop off A, then pick up C, then drop off B, and go on forever until the car runs out of gas or the driver faints and then he gets an accident, right? So the driver never gets a break because we as in the Uber dispatching system is constantly giving them trips that's like optimized, and the driver never gets a break, potentially. So I just built this simple feature called Stop New Requests, where the driver at any time could go into the app, and once the driver feels like, hey, I've had enough, I want to refill my petrol or just go for lunch, go in the app and hit Stop New Requests, and the Uber like dispatching system would stop sending them new requests. And this feature, I think by the time I left, was deployed to 200,000 drivers. By now, it should be deployed to all of Uber's drivers. So these are the kind of projects that interns get, not bringing coffee to someone. Well, the driver gets coffee now, but I built the feature to help them get coffee. Yeah, so those are the kind of projects that you get to do. It's like real world stuff that actually, that project hasn't shipped yet because when you're working on such a high level project, you want to test it a lot. So I'm sure they're going to test it for at least a year or so before they ship something like that, because you need to make sure that the driver doesn't say something and then the action doesn't happen, then he gets into a real accident. So these kind of features you really have to test them. You also get to learn a lot at these internships. Like, the people who work here are extremely smart, right? Like the people who work at Facebook, Google, all these companies are extremely smart. And just by being in the same environment and talking to them and interacting with them and just seeing how they write code, you learn a lot. Like you get a lot of perspective of what you're doing in school, and you get to apply that in your real life. You become more attractive to future employers as well, just because in your resume when you say that, oh, if a company is trying to hire you and they realize that you have passed the engineering bar to work at Google, that's a pretty good sign for the company to hire you, because Google has already done the work for that company by saying that, hey, this guy has worked for us. And you also bring a lot of context back to what you're learning in school, because when you're in school, it's a really, really good thing to do internships, because you spend like 1 year in school, I think about 9 months in school, and then 3 months in internship. You got to really apply what you're learning in school, so over the next sem, you have more context on what you're doing, and you understand why you're doing what you're doing in school. Okay, you also get to discover what you like. I mean, most people in university, they only get to work once they've graduated. And the thing is, if you do internships, you get to it's a 3-month trial, right? It's a 2-way trial. You get to try the company gets to try you. So is software engineering really what you want? So you get to try that out. Are you interested in mobile stuff? Do you want to make apps? Are you interested in infrastructure, front end, design? All these things, right? If you start in your freshman year, you get almost 3 internship slots by the time you graduate. And you get to try out all these kinds of things and build your interest. You basically get to work even before your peers have graduated and try out what you like. It's a really good thing. Do you even like working in a tech company and things like that? I'll just go through some examples of what happened in each company. So when I was at Twitter, this really interesting thing they had was, they were just a very transparent company internally. They were okay with every employee. I think there are 3,000 something employees when I worked there. They were okay with all employees knowing everything about the company. So every Thursday, they had this thing called tea time, where the CEO would sit there, and everyone in the company is invited to watch and attend this event. And they'll basically talk about everything that went good and bad in the last week. Good press, bad press, and it's fine, because this is a confined space. Everyone who works here cares about the company, and it's fine to talk about confidential stuff here. And that was really interesting. The company is so big, and I was really surprised to see that they're still so open. Completely different from how Apple works, by the way. Just because of how secretive the company is, no one knows anything. Half the employees, their bookmarks is like macrumors.com, because even they need to read that to find out what their own company is doing. Because they don't know what's happening outside their own team. That's just how the company works. That's the best way to keep secrets, right? You only expose your secrets to exactly who need to know it. But that's just how Apple works, and they are successful in their own way. Next. Oh yeah, this was something else that Twitter encouraged while I was there. My manager, This was a roof deck, by the way. This is like their lunch area inside the building. They encourage, like my manager at least, he encouraged me to have lunch with someone new every day. Just approach someone. You can use our internal chat system to chat up with anyone. Just say, hey, can I have lunch with you? And it's not someone I even know, and it's something that I just did. And just to meet these people and just to have them in your contact list, it's a really, really cool, like a cool and important thing to do. What's next? Oh yeah, internships are also fun. So this is away from the technical side. If you're doing an overseas internship, it can be anywhere. Like there are people in this room who have done internships in Australia, in London, in Switzerland, in the US, East Coast, West Coast, it doesn't matter. Like the people have done internships anywhere. But as long as you're doing it outside of Singapore, you're going to travel a lot. And the good thing about internships is, and I found this really valuable, after Friday 5 p.m., the company doesn't own your time. Friday 5 p.m. to Monday, whenever you start your work, you have no homeworks, you have no assignments, you have nothing to care about except your own enjoyment. Like, you have nothing to care about. Especially when you're an intern, you have no responsibility, so it's fine. Right? So you won't be set like on call, you won't be the on-call engineer or anything. So the weekends were extremely fun because every weekend I could do something for fun. Like fly around, go meet for events, go for tech events, go for hackathons and things like that. It's very different from school life, where you're always worried about the next test or assignment. Like unless you're me, who doesn't care about anything. Yeah, we're also getting to meet people from our other colleges, which is important as well. So some examples of the things that I got to do that were fun. I was at Twitter during the 2014 World Cup. I think I gave the story last year as well. So when the World Cup was happening, they need to make sure that Twitter works during the World Cup, because when someone scores a goal, everyone in Brazil, I think it was Brazil World Cup, would send like, goal! And the tweets would go up by spike up by 50% for that second. For that few seconds, the tweets sent in that second would go up by a 50% for the second after that. So the really cool thing is, these are like engineers, and they're watching the World Cup to make sure that Twitter is alive during the World Cup. Because we have to, because when there's like a penalty shootout, that's when the most excitement happens. Like everyone's like, oh, the referee is cheating, blah, 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 all these kinds of things, right? So and the really cool thing that we found out here is, like ESPN, when you're watching ESPN to watch the World Cup, it takes about 4 seconds to transfer from the feed from Brazil to the US. But Twitter is real time, it happens in milliseconds. So we saw goals happening before we saw it on ESPN. So we could watch the charts that showed live tweets per second, and then like we could see spiking up, and then we knew, okay, this is either a goal or a referee or someone kicked someone or someone got a red card, and then we'll see it on screen. Like 3 seconds later, we'll see it on the screen. That's because like Twitter is just so real time and TV is slow. Another thing I got myself involved in is when Twitter, when they launch a new product, they have this thing called a war room. And I got to sit in the war room. This is basically a room where when they launch a new feature, they just want all hands on deck. They want everyone who's involved in the product to be in one room. The PR people, the engineers, the designers, the data scientists, and everyone, just so that when we launch it, we make sure that if something is wrong, because when you launch something, this is the first time your product is going to be used by millions of people, right? So they want to make sure that everything's going to be done on time. There are like stats on the screen and stuff like that. This is like really like interesting stuff that I wasn't exposed to. I'm somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I'm also going to travel a lot. This is one of the random trips that I took and a random video that I took. The US is very big, so if you're in the US specifically, there's a lot of things to do in the US. You could be there forever and always be traveling and seeing something new every single weekend. Oh, my next one, yeah. When I was at Apple, I also got to attend WWDC. So when I was at Apple as an Apple engineer, they gave me the rare opportunity to attend the conference representing the company itself. So that was really an awesome experience. Yeah, so these are the kinds of, like, you get to go for conferences as well. If your company's hosting a conference, you usually get to attend that. They at least give you a chance to attend and see how it's going. Because, as I said, an internship is always a two-way thing. You are trying to convince the company that you should work for the company. And I mean, the company should hire you, and the company is trying to convince you that you should work for us. And the selling is happening both ways. You would see when we go to the perks section later on. Another thing, that's Tim Cook on the left. We had internal concerts at Apple. They happen every month. Because they own iTunes, the biggest music store in the world, so they have contacts with every single musician. So I think we had Pharrell come down, Adam Lambert. They basically come in and give private concerts to Apple employees only. And that's Tim Cook. I have a video of him dancing, but I can't show that in case you guys record it and it goes somewhere on the internet. Yeah. Yeah, perks. like for US internships, they pay really well just because of competitively, like when one company needs to pay in some rate, like every company tries to match that figure and you end up getting like a really good rate. And like other perks are really awesome as well. Like some companies like Facebook, for example, they give you free housing. That's on top of the really good pay that you get. Laptops are default. I shouldn't have shown the number first, right? Like everyone, you get a laptop because of like data privacy issues. They want to make sure that all your company work is done on a property that's not yours, so that when you leave the company, like you don't get to steal anything for yourself. You get a bunch of free shirts. You also get discounts. That's the Apple Watch. I was at Apple when the Apple Watch launched. When the Apple Watch launched, they gave it to everyone for 50% discount, which was quite significant. One more slide is this guy who works at Berkeley. He made this, so basically he did this random survey of all the interns in the Bay Area, and this is how much they're paying for this summer. So for like from the summer from May to August this year, this is what they're paying right now. And most companies are like in this ballpark. And the reason why they do it is just because it's really competitive and it's really hard to get this job, and they just want to make sure that you have an awesome time and you will join the company afterwards. Like the best ones, they even give you free housing. So yeah, that's how it is to do an internship in Silicon Valley. All right, next slide. Oh yeah, Uber credits. Yeah, at Uber I Uber credits as well, so all my rides are free. What's the next slide? Oh, food. Yeah, food is extremely important to me because I care a lot about food. And free food in almost all the companies except Apple because they don't have a culture of free food, but everywhere else is free food. And the food is awesome, right? Because the way these companies work is we want to make sure our engineers are as productive as possible. So anything that helps with productivity or anything that helps to make sure you stay in office for that extra minute is good for you, and we will give it to you for free. Because when you don't have free food, you always have, like at 11 o'clock you would leave the office, go out for lunch, pick up your friends, and then by the time you're back it's like 12:30 and you're wasted 19 minutes doing nothing. But when you offer them free food, they just go for lunch in like the 5th floor. They have lunch for 10 minutes and they're back. So from company point of view, it makes their engineers more productive. So that's like a two-way thing. But the food is really good as well, so you never want to leave. And they give you all 3 meals, so why leave? So you may think if you have all 3 meals, you could also like basically live there, right? You can because of the shower. This is Twitter. They had a really good shower, and they don't encourage you to live there, but the main point of it is like after your gym, you could gym somewhere, like Twitter has its own gym. And then after the gym, you can just go there and have a good shower and then go back to the office. Everything's provided, towels, soap, blah, blah, blah. So all you need to bring is yourself. Yeah, rooftop garden, I already talked about that. The rooftop garden. Okay, so the whole point of that was to tell you why you should do an internship and why it's important to do one in your summers and not waste your summers doing like nothing else. So how can I get an internship? Let's go to the next step one. We have done the why and what. Let's go how. 0 to 1 internship. So this is the process to get an internship, right? You have to apply, the most important step. And when you apply, you usually use your resume. And if they like your resume and what your resume says, they would contact back to you. And then once they contact you, you would have some phone screens. I'll go into some details about what a phone screen is. And then optionally, you would have an on-site. An on-site is basically when they fly you into the office, or in Singapore, you go to the office and you actually have an on-site interview. For internships, that doesn't really happen. For full-time, you always get an on-site, but rarely for an internship. And then you get an offer. And then you get to choose to accept the offer or not accept it. So step 1. Most people don't even reach at step 1. Like if you do a random survey of most people in like SOC and you ask them why haven't you done an internship, then you ask them like have you done step 1? They just say no. Yeah, like I've not even got to the applying stage because I'm afraid that I'll get rejected. And that's the most important thing, right? You need to go through that fear of rejection and just tell yourself that I'm ready. If you think you're ready, and you must be ready, and just apply, and just see what happens, right? These are the common reasons why people say they're not ready. My resume is not ready. I'm not ready for interviews. I need more time to study for my interview. I don't know when. I really want to work at this company. What if I screw up? I applied to a company already, just waiting for a response. I mean, all these things are valid excuses, but they're also invalid at the same time, right? Because if you want to get what you want, you just have to try hard for it, and you can always get something if you try hard enough. I'll just go through some of these examples. My resume is not ready, is not a valid excuse. Go away. The thing about I'm not ready for interviews. Okay, that's valid, and we'll go through some tips about how to become ready for these technical interviews and how you can practice. There are a bunch of resources online. There are thousands of questions online. You can practice yourself. And I don't really know. I really want to work at the company. What if I screw up? That is a semi-valid excuse. But what I want to tell you is most of these interviews, they are tweaked in a way where they want to make sure that they are reading out false positive. Okay, whatever the one is where you get the wrong person in, right? False positives, right? False positive. So their interviews are tweaked in a way where even if you make a single mistake, that is enough reason for them to not offer you, an offer to join the company. That's because of the fact that if a bad team member joins their team, and usually these teams are very small, you could really affect the company in a really, really bad way. So they want to make sure that everyone who joins the team is super high quality. And the engineers, they know that. They're hiring boards, they know that we reject more people than we accept. And because of that, they're completely okay with you trying again. Right? Almost all these companies, if you get rejected once, they're completely fine with you trying again because they know that there is our system of accepting people is not foolproof. We reject a lot of people that we think are competent just because they made one tiny mistake. And we just want to make sure that they're always competent. So it's fine to try again. I think that Google internally, they allow you to try you can try at Google 3 times before they hell ban you forever, I think. Yeah. No. I don't know why this no. Next slide. I think the no meant that those are not valid reasons. So how do you apply, right? So there are many ways to apply. The most basic way is every single company has a job site. And once you know this fact, every company has a job site. If you go to google.com/jobs, I think we'll end up there. Every company has a job site. And in every job site, you can go online and apply and submit your resume. They might ask for a cover letter. You usually don't need to fill that in. Usually your resume should be enough to explain who you are. Other than the job site, there are career fairs. This is something that Singapore, like NUS, is getting much better in. Recently, the last 2 years, I've seen many more big name tech companies representing themselves in Singapore. In the career fair that we just had, PayPal was there, Uber was there, Google was there, Facebook was there, and they were all hiring for the Silicon Valley positions. Actually, they were not hiring for local positions, and that's a good way to get recognized because when you go to the job sites, there are hundreds of applicants that go in. When you go through the career fair, the chances of you getting your resume recognized is slightly higher. There are also info sessions and tech talks. Usually when a company is coming to NUS to give a talk, it's usually a recruiting event. They don't try to say it that way, but it usually is. Right? When I'm sure, I didn't attend the Google talk, but I'm pretty sure that was a recruiting event as well because they're opening a Google engineering campus in Singapore and they're trying to get people to join them. And if you go for these sessions, there might be a recruiting pitch at the end. You can talk to the engineers and see how you can get a job there. And the last one is referral. So that's usually that guarantees you the highest chance of getting an interview. And to get a referral, it usually works in the process where you know someone who's already worked at company X, and that person can really knows you as a good person. You're really quite close to that person, and that person can vouch for you. And that person would be able to tell company X that, hey, this is someone that I think we should bring in. He's strong enough, and I think he's competent to be in our team. Why don't we interview him? And the reason why that's really well recognized is, from a company's point of view, if person A has passed my interview and he's an awesome employee in my company, if A says that B is good, obviously B should have some value there. That's a really good positive signal there. Because person A works for me, and A told me that B is good. And you should try to interview B. So usually when you refer someone, you're almost definitely guaranteed an interview, at least. You're not guaranteed an offer. You still have to go through the same interview process. You don't get any special treatment, but usually at least guaranteed an interview if you get a strong referral. Oh yeah, so when should I apply? This is something that most people get wrong. So this is very dependent on where you're trying to apply. So if you're looking for a Singaporean internship, GrabTaxi, Wiki, Carousel, any of those companies, you could apply next year and that's perfectly fine. You could apply in February, March for a summer internship and that's fine. But the problem is, and most people don't know this, which is why they miss out, for a US internship, specific to a Silicon Valley internship, they start their application process very early. This is because of how many people are applying. The moment summer ends, which was August, in September they've already started filling in their positions for next summer. And the timeline is usually set in a way where by December or January they have filled up all their spots. And then when you realize that, hey, in February I realized I want to do an internship in Silicon Valley, by the time it's too late. Because in Apple, for example, I know for a fact that by December they close down all the slots, and I think Google should be like Jan or something like that. So this is the most important thing to know right now, the fact that you should be applying now, basically, like this month, next month, and November is like the best time to apply to these companies if you're interested in interning in Silicon Valley. All right, so step 2. Once you do apply, what happens after that? So you get a challenge. I think you're going to go through that afterwards. So I'll just quickly go through the slides. Yeah, there's nothing much. Step 3 is you get a technical phone interview. I'm not going to go through this because Jian is going to go through this in the next section of this talk. And yeah, we'll be going through all these questions later on, soon. There might be multiple rounds of technical interviews. Most companies for an internship role, they have 2 to 3. That's what it usually is. Like I've heard people who have had to do like 3 or 4 rounds before, but that's completely fine. It's very different from a full-time interview. For a full-time interview, you usually have like between 4 to 6 like interviews. Yeah. What is the next step? Step 4 is the offer. We're not going to talk about the offer here because you're just going to accept it. So, what is there to talk about? Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what actually happens at the technical interviews, and I'm going to pass on to John.
This is 8 really.
That's fine.
Are they okay with staying?
I'll ask them. Yeah.
Okay.
So our event is supposed to be scheduled at 8, and I want to respect all your time. So you gotta go, right? Go ahead. If not, after this section, Vishnu continues sharing about some tips, and then we would want to have a Q&A in case you have any questions. So if you want, I can go through like how to do technical interviews, or otherwise, if you have any questions you want to ask, do we want to open it up for?
I think we can continue on.
Continue on?
Leave?
Anyone need? Okay, so if you have to go, we're gonna continue on. I'm gonna make it as quick as I can, and then if you have to leave, just feel free because it's 8 already.
Have a screen.
All right. Okay, so technical interviews. What happens during technical interviews? Usually it's about 45 minutes to 1 hour, and then it starts off with a very soft introduction. The interviewer will kind of like introduce him or herself, talk about the role, maybe talk a bit about the company, the culture, and then after that there will be the actual technical interview, the actual technical question. It could be more than one, depends on the how well you do, how quickly you do it, depends on the scope of the question also. And then after that, you will most likely have time for Q&A with the interviewers. You could ask questions about the company or the role or whatever you want. So technical interviews can happen either in person or over the phone. So for my experience, it has almost always been over the phone call with a shared like Google Doc instance, except for Stripe. So Stripe is pretty special. One phone call when I was in Singapore and in NSF, and then they decided to fly me over for an on-site interview. And then on-site we have 3 rounds of technical interviews, whiteboarding and stuff, and 1 lunch with a manager. So for internships, most likely they will not fly you, but Stripe just switched, because they don't need this, which is really nice. So these are kind of questions at the beginning of the technical interview where the interviewer would ask. So these are very soft, tell me about yourself kind of questions. Tell me about blah blah blah, where blah 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 is something that they find in your resume. For example, if you say that, oh, I worked on this school project where I use a certain programming language, or I use a certain framework, I use Rails, then they might, okay, what do you like about Rails? What challenges have you faced when you're using Rails, things like that. Or sometimes they like to ask about, like, what's your biggest challenge? Is the mic okay?
I reduced the volume.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm too loud, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's very subtle. So like they like to ask about what's the biggest challenge you have faced in a certain project or assignment. I'll speak softer.
Yeah.
Is it too soft now?
It's too soft now.
It's very hard to please Vishnu. Yeah, so other kind of questions. This usually happens in the HR phone call. So from my experience, right, first, when you apply, they accept you, the recruiter would call you first and then ask you about like, what kind of roles are you interested in? What kind of passion do you have? Do you know about the culture of the company? Do you know about the company's core products? Things like that. So to make sure that there's like a little culture fit. So yeah, these are questions that you should be prepared. You should know the answers to if you are even interested in the company. So questions like, do you even know about the company? Like if I apply for Twitter, I better know that what's Twitter's mission, what's their goal, what's their core product, and what kind of other products they have, and be very confident why you want to join the company. And then after the soft introduction, right, where you ask you, tell me about yourself, will be the actual technical questions. So these are very easy. You might be laughing like, oh, this guy got to Google because he can add 2 hexadecimal numbers. Like, no, this is warming up, right? The first question they don't want to scare the hell of you, right? They ask you a very easy, quick, like 5-10 minutes kind of warm up question, get you started, right? Because you might be, just wake up because of time zone difference. So some sample question is like, they explain very simple concepts like what is a deadlock? You should be able to kind of explain in your own words what a deadlock is. And this is where my earlier point about paying attention in school comes in very handy. So a sample JavaScript question like, what is this? This keyword is a very special thing in JavaScript. Depending on the calling context, it could be different thing. So why I mention this is because if you put in your resume that you know JavaScript, then make sure you know JavaScript, right? Don't put in Java because you took this module that taught you Java for like 1 week, and then you're like, oh, or you use like Haskell, you went through the tutorial and like, oh, I know Haskell, and then the interviewer asks you about Haskell and you're like, I don't really know. So be very confident, whatever you put in your resume, better have evidence to support your claim. Okay. And some other kind of like technical questions that doesn't involve much coding but requires a bit more explanation would be things like, tell me what happens after you type www.google.com into the address bar. This is a very, very, very interesting question because you could take this in so many directions based on your interest. Okay, let's say your interest is in networks, Okay, you can talk all the way from www.google.com, HTTP, right? You can talk about HTTP, how the protocol works, and how HTTP is like layer 5 or 7 of the networking OCPI or whatever shit protocol, and then like you can talk about HTTP over TCP whatever, and then how the BGP internet protocol works, and then you can go all this how name servers work, DNS, all this routing whatever, then you go all the way down to hardware, how your routers work, Wi-Fi network, so many things. But if you're interested in let's say browsers, you can talk about how the browser interprets this. You can pass this to regex, whatever, send to this network call, then there's this event loop that runs in the background, and like I don't know, VA engine, and you could like compile. And just in that compilation, it's whatever you want to talk about. So this is a great chance to showcase your talent and passion. I probably ranted a lot and none of you understand what I say, but like the point is that this kind of questions can and will pop up. So it's a good chance for you to showcase your talent. And then this is the meat of the interview, which will take out like a good 20 to 30 minutes, depending on your ability to solve this kind of questions. So look at the first question. It's very simple. Find an element in a sorted pivoted array. And here is where it gets interesting, right? So the first thing is like you want to find an element. Like what's the easiest way? You always want to think about the most simple solution to the problem first. What's the simplest problem to find an element in a sorted pivoted array? Just iterate through the array and then check if your element is the correct element. But then what is the complexity? O(n), right? Because you have to iterate through n elements. So this is where school actually matters. You are expected to know your big O notation. You are expected to be able to quickly find out if a certain algorithm is of a certain complexity, both in terms of time and also space. Okay, so this is where you explore the question a bit more. Okay, why does the question say that it's a sorted pivoted array? Okay, if I give you a sorted array, what is the fastest algorithm you can find a certain element? Binary search. All of you are getting to Google already. Okay, but so it's good for you during an interview to like, oh, okay, if I have a sorted array, I can use binary search, and then there's O of log n, right? But what if it's pivoted? What is the difference between a pivoted and a non-pivoted array? And then like you probably okay, maybe I need a binary search that's kind of modified because now I cannot assume that everything is in a sorted order. I have to kind of like figure out if I'm in the pivot, and then if I'm in the pivot, I gotta go a certain way because now it's pivoted, So these are the tricky questions. Not say tricky, but like they won't give you very obvious direct questions that you have done in school. They'll add a little bit of twist to it, and you are kind of expected to still be able to do it. These are more rare questions. I got this at Stripe. So questions like, design a certain system. So one of the sample questions would be like, you want to design a system that can collect metrics, right? You want to collect metrics from all your instances. You have like thousands of instances running on AWS, and you want metrics. You want health status checks on all these systems. How would you do that? And then you might think like, oh, it could be a simple, HTTP request polling, but then how do you make it scalable? What if you have tens of thousands of instances? Where are you going to store this? How often do you want to query? Is it every second, every 3 seconds? How long do you have to persist this data for? Is it 1 week, 1 month, 1 year? And then are you going to store it in the machine? What if the machine runs out of RAM? What if the machine runs out of hard disk space? Where are you going to archive it? It's a lot of things to think about. That's why you should explore more breadth, right? You all look very confused. Sorry. Is this me? Oh, okay. So now you kind of have an idea what happens during a technical interview. How do you prepare for the interview, right? The interview is really a test, okay? The interview is a test where you showcase to the interviewer that you have what it takes, you have what they are looking for. And like being in Singapore, right? All you all study in Singapore, you've taken countless of tests, right? From the day you were in kindergarten, you took a test. Until now, you are still taking a test every 3 months, or more than one test every 3 months. So practice, tests, how you prepare for your O levels, A levels, you do past year paper. Same thing, algorithm questions, data structure questions, go online, find questions, do it, practice, get comfortable with it. So the next time someone asks you, how do you find an element in a sorted pivoted array, and you can say, oh, I use a modified binary search that looks at where I am in the pivot and then decide to go left or right. Simple, right? Once you know it, it's very easy. And then once they give you another question that is kind of similar, you can like, oh, I know how to do this, so maybe I can modify it so that like I can get the correct solution. The other points are kind of like relevant for any kind of interviews that you go for, right? You want to be fresh, be prepared. Even though it's a phone call, they don't see your face, they don't see that you haven't brushed your teeth or washed your face in the morning. You want to feel fresh and sharp. When you dress sharp, when you feel sharp, you will perform more confidently, you will perform better also. Yeah, in general, you have time for questions for the interviewer. So prepare things to ask the interviewer. Questions that are generic, maybe like, can you describe to me how your day-to-day life is like? Find out a little bit more about what they spend every day doing. So these are some resources where you can go to practice. Popcoder, LeetCode, HackerRank, they're all really good. LeetCode is super good because they have a lot of questions and they also have a lot of solutions. So they actually tell you many different ways of solving the same question. And then HackerRank is really good because it's like an in-browser editor and a compiler, so you can actually run your code and make sure that your stuff actually works correctly, and they have test cases for you to check your results also. There's this book that's really good called Cracking the Coding Interview. If you go to the NUS library portal and you look for this book, it's actually available, but it's usually on loan by someone. Okay, this book is really good. It goes through how to prepare for interviews, basically like this presentation but expanded into like hundreds of pages. And it gives you a lot of sample questions from all the different kind of topics. And a lot of those questions are actual questions that companies have asked. So it's all very anecdotal, it's all very real. So if you read that book, you will feel more prepared and be more confident about things. This last point may or may not be relevant, okay, but it's still pretty important for you to be comfortable writing code on paper. Because if you get an interview where you're whiteboarding, right, means you're writing code on the whiteboard, it's a very strange thing for you to do. You always write code in an IDE or on your computer, right? And then like if there's an error, it's an undefined variable, you get red squiggly lines screaming at you, right? But if you run a whiteboard and you get something that's like bad syntactically, you're just gonna get your interview mocking you, right? Your interviewer is gonna be like, oh, this guy or girl doesn't really know his or her stuff well. So it's important to write code on paper, write code on whiteboard, practice the medium that you're doing. So if you know that it's gonna be a phone interview, then you should go and try and have a mock phone interview with a friend or someone who has done it, so that you can like try and see how it feels. What's this? So at a very high level, the technical interviews achieve certain goals, right? Besides assessing whether you have the technical abilities, it's also a way for the interviewer to see if you kind of like fit in. If you are in general a nice person to work with, and if like you would be a good colleague, of course they don't want like weird, like crazy people, kind of like strange-ish. Everyone is kind of strange in a way, but like not too strange lah. Okay, yeah. So in general, they want to see if you are nice enough for them to want to like sit beside you and work with you. And this is about during the actual interview, whether you're on a phone call or on site. Think before you speak. Don't be like me. Usually I speak before I think. That's why I speak so fast. So you want to process a question. Let's say the interviewer tells you a question. No, put a question in your head for a while, think about it, look at all the keywords. Okay, we'll go through our exercise later, but the example on the binary, the sorted pivoted array, so it's very important that you saw the word sorted and you saw the word pivoted. Because if you miss either of these keywords, your solution will turn out to be either completely wrong or too slow, or yeah. So clarify any doubts you have. So like, if you are not very sure what it means by pivot, is it a right pivot? Is it a complete mirror image pivot? What kind of pivot is it? Clarify, ask questions, ask your interviewer questions. Cite like examples, oh, if my array is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if I pivot it at the fourth element, is it 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, or is it 5, 1, 2, 3, 4? There's only one option for that, okay? But like clarify, the main thing is clarify. And articulate your thoughts, especially during phone interviews, because like I said, they don't see your face, right? Facial expression is a super important part of your communication. Body language is like what, 60% of the communication. So when they don't see what your body language is, they don't see your facial expression, they have no idea whether you are like furiously thinking, or are you just like completely dumbfounded. Because to them, it will appear the same thing, silence on the other end of the line, right? So try to articulate your thoughts, right? If you're thinking about, again, the binary search, you'll be like, oh, okay, if I have a sorted array, I can use a binary search and that's like log n, that's really quick, but then now I have a pivoted sorted array. So it kind of seems like I can still use the binary search because a portion of the array is sorted, but not the entire array. So maybe I need to modify this in some way. Like that's exactly how I would go on with the interview. Like I would think out loud, whatever is going on in your head, think out loud. And then like try and vocalize it to your interviewer. This is like a sample question that you might get, and then like we can go through how you would do this. So, question is, write a function that removes duplicates from a list. Simple, right? And then you start typing JavaScript, right? Function, parentheses, list, and curly brace, close curly brace, and then like, what's next? Before you even type any code, right? What's your first step? Clarify, right? Is this question ambiguous or not? Ambiguous, okay? So write a function is like, okay, it's not ambiguous, write a function, right? Okay. Removes duplicates, okay? What does it mean to be duplicates? Maybe me and you have different ideas of duplicates. Maybe I think that if I have a list of 1, 1, 1, and I remove duplicates, 1 is a duplicate. So I remove all the ones, and then my result is an empty list. But maybe the interviewer was thinking, remove the duplicates, but keep one of it. Remove any duplicates. So if I get a list of 1, 1, 1, and I remove duplicates, I have a list of just one element, which is the number 1. And these are completely different results, right? One is wrong and one is right, and it depends on what the interviewer wants. So it's very important in this case to clarify what do they mean by remove duplicates. And actually, even more fundamentally, a list. Okay? It's one list, right? But what's in the list? Is it strings? Is it ints? Is it more lists? Can the list be arbitrarily nested? Is it certain classes? What is it? If you don't know what it is, how do you check for duplicates? Like there's no equality, right? If your list is like JavaScript, you can contain int strings, objects, other lists, then what is the notion of equality? So these are things that you would want to clarify with your interviewer. And once you clarify, then and you're clear that what happens, you can sort of like kind of ask like, okay, so let me confirm. If I have a list of ints, okay, that's what you want, and I have the integers 1, 1, 1. Is it 1 or 0, no elements? And then once the interviewer tells you that, okay, the correct answer is this, then you have like a base case to work with, and then you can start like writing your function. Okay, so obviously your code should compile, whether it's in the editor, in a Google Doc, or on the whiteboard. You should be pretty OCD about your code. You should treat it as like, apply all the skills that you learn in all your CS mods that has to do with like proper software engineering techniques, which includes proper variable names. Don't go crazy with like var, ijkl. Proper method names, comments if you need them. One very good tip is start with pseudocode, right? In Tandem you learn, you might have learned that you sometimes you write comments, pseudocode, and then you start to like flash things out and replace them with actual running code. So that's actually a very good technique to help you like build the skeleton of your solution and then slowly fill in bit by bit. And it's actually very helpful because one of my experience interviewing was I started with zero code, and then I ended up not having enough time to implement. So I had this line of zero code that said like, oh, I should do this, but I never really implemented it, and I ran out of time. But like I knew that I had to do it. So the interviewer knew that I knew that I had to do it, but I didn't have time to write the solution. So to the interviewer, it might be like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing, but you just didn't have time. And if you give him 5 more minutes, you'll be able to do it. So it creates kind of like a little false illusion that you know how to do it. You know, it's a little trickery there. Don't do it too often, but it's a good step. Because going from no code to running code is very difficult. If you have a step in between that has like non-running code but has the actual logic or algorithm, it's a lot easier to move from step A to the end. And then testing. So once you write your code and you're like, oh, okay, this code should work, I think. Try it. Try in your head. Be your own compiler, right, or interpreter. Run through your code, give sample inputs, and like try to list out the state of the variables at each step. So if let's say you have an array, right, and then you are iterating through the array, so you have an index I or you have an element n that represents the element in the array. So you'll be like, okay, on my first step, the element n is the integer 1, and then like on the second step, the element n is integer 2, and then like keep doing this, work it out in your head, write it as comment, and then it can be useful for test cases, and it shows the interviewer that you are pretty serious about this and like you know how the code works. You don't even know how to write code, but you actually know like how the whole thing is running. Okay, so now Vishnu.
Right, so I'm going to quickly close out this talk with some tips. Just switch hands. Okay, let's go on to my quick tips. Yeah, the first tip is grades don't matter as much as you think. So you guys know I worked at these 3 companies. The immediate question is my GPA 4.9 or is it 4.98? Actually, none of them have even asked me for my transcript. None of these companies have ever asked me for my transcript. Some companies still ask, but so for the companies that I apply to, they don't even have proof that I'm an NUS student. They just believe my resume. And that's fine, because what they're looking for is someone who's capable and someone who has worked on like things that's outside of school that proves that you are a competent person. Grades don't really show that, because getting an A+, there are many people in the school that get an A+ and graduate with a really high GPA, but what does it actually prove? It proves that you're smart in exams, right? But it doesn't actually prove that you can be a person who works at Google. And yeah, so no one has ever looked at my grades. That's exactly the point I wanted to bring across here. School is still important though, because what you learn in school is, the most important thing to learn in school is how to learn. And that's a really, really important skill. And the most important skill to have is to learn stuff well and fast. To give you an example here, when you are going through the Facebook interview, Facebook doesn't expect you to know everything in the world, because Facebook is a really, really complex company. There's so many things happening. In fact, when you join Facebook as a full-time engineer, it takes you 3 months to even learn how Facebook works. They have this boot camp that lasts 3 months. And it takes 3 months to even learn how the technology works. So you only get to pick your team after 3 months. That's how complex the company is. And when you go for an interview, they aren't expecting someone that knows everything. The interviews are optimized to find out someone who can learn quickly and fast, which is why they give you like this kind of like teaser brain, like these kind of really like somewhat hard questions, but that you've never seen in your life before. But the whole point of that is to see and test you when you're given a problem that you've never faced before. How are you going to think and solve on the spot? Because when you work at a company like Facebook, you're always seeing problems that no one else has seen before, right? Because Facebook, 1.7 billion users, they're going to hit like 2 billion users soon. They're going to like hit problems that they've never seen before, and they want engineers who can fix this kind of problems. When you're faced with problems, how are you going to solve the problem? That's what they are actually looking for. Hack on side projects. So one thing that I always get is my resume is empty. I mean, I have done like some school projects and stuff. How can I improve my resume? This is the first thing I tell them. Work on stuff that's outside of school just for fun, right? There are so many things that you can work. You can make an iOS app to fix this problem. You can make a website to do this. Just build random side projects just for fun. Whatever interests you. If you're interested in picking up a new language, just pick it up, make something, publish it online. And these are things that you can add on your resume just to show that, hey, I'm someone who's interested in all these things. and I'm a really cool person as well. And also, if you publish them like open source on GitHub, that's also a way for recruiters to see that you are someone who's awesome, right? If you have a GitHub profile with lots of projects, and all these projects have lots of stars, that's an awesome, good signal to show to these companies as well. And they can just see your code right there itself. Keep improving. So it's really hard to, I mean, if you look at most, it's somewhat hard to get an internship, especially an overseas internship if you're in your freshman year. Most companies, they only try to take in PhD people in the second and third year, but you should still try, as I've always been saying. But if you don't get an internship, it's fine. You can always try for a local internship, and even if you don't get that, it's fine, because you should tell yourself that I can always get better, because I just had an interview, and I failed the interview, and I'm going to get better for my next interview. And if you don't get an internship, spend this summer making sure that next summer you will have an internship. And you can always be improving that way. And if that's what you want, you can always get that. And you can also do stuff like read articles. I'm sure you've heard of Hacker News, right? Like Hacker News is an awesome way to just be up to date on what's happening in the tech world out there. What's the latest technologies out there? What's the new JavaScript framework of this hour? There's a new JavaScript framework like every hour. So what's the latest one for this time, and all those kinds of stuff. Yeah, and so make your summers count towards next year's application in case you don't get one this summer, and that's fine. Don't accept no for an answer. Like I've said, these companies, they're optimizing to make sure we don't get any false negatives. So they do reject people who are really, really competent just because they made a small mistake, and that's fine. You should just try again and apply to more companies and just try your best. For my first internship at Twitter, when I was looking for internships at the time, I applied to 17 companies, and 15 of them ignored me, and only 2 of them replied, and only 1 of them gave me an interview. So only, like, I basically had only 1 chance, and that chance, like, it luckily worked out. Another story I have is, like, I really wanted to work at Apple. So Apple's a company that I've wanted to work for like almost 9 years now, and I've always wanted to work for them just to see how it's like to work at that company. In the last years, I've applied like 4 times. Always, I get completely ignored, and I don't know why, because I'm not from Stanford or MIT. And my resume just gets ignored, and but I didn't really stop giving up, and I was always looking for, do I know someone who works at Apple, can I get in through someone, and this is what I actually did. So this is a story of how I got into Apple. One day I used Twitter a lot, and I saw this tweet, this random guy, he's actually an engineering manager in the Xcode team, and he tweeted saying, the Xcode team is hiring, like, apply here if you want to work at Apple. And then I saw the tweet, and I just sent him a reply saying, is your team looking for interns too? And because of that reply, he found out my email address through my Twitter bio. He sent me an email saying, hey, sure, why didn't you send me your resume? And just because of the fact that my resume was sent to an actual engineer, he referred me through the internal referral system. And I was confirmed an interview, and through that interview, I got into the company. So there are many ways to get in. You can hack your life in many, many ways, and this is a hack as well, trying to get into a company just through internship. So many ways to get what you want. This slide, I'm just going to show it one more time, just because of how important it is. If you're interested in Silicon Valley, the best time to apply is now, right? September, October, November, December. Then by the time it's December, most of the companies will stop taking an applicant. So best time to apply is right now. And I think that is it.
Chen Yang.
Yeah. Do you want to Q&A first, and then?
Chen Yang is here already.
Okay. Yeah. We are going to go to one more talk. Chen Yang, he worked at Google Zurich, which is in Switzerland. And he's going to talk about what it's like to do an internship